Thank you so much for having me to be here this weekend. As Jane just mentioned, I am the Government Relations Manager at AAUW, and I've been there for 7 years working on many of the public policy initiatives that I know you all hear about, and I hope you all are excited to see happening in Washington, D.C. on behalf of AAUW. And coming out and meeting AAUW members is an incredibly important part of the work that we do, because it helps us hear what's happening in states, it helps us learn about the things that you all are learning on the ground, and it helps us figure out what we should be focusing on and talking about in Washington, and how AAUW can really be plugged into what's going on. My talk today is about hot topics on campus, but why it is appropriate that someone from the Public Policy Department do that talk is because hot topics on campus, what we're hearing students care about right now, also happen conveniently to be some hot topics in Washington, D.C. when it comes to public policy right now, too. And so I'm going to make some of those connections, but I hope that what we leave this initial conversation with is some information about sort of the state of higher education and some things that are happening on college campuses, and the fact that AAUW is an integral part of talking about those topics and making some things change, taking action on those topics. So that's sort of what I want to start the morning off with, and hopefully that will build into some of the conversations, the discussion groups, hearing from students in a little bit too. So I think it'll be a really nice connection between all the things we're talking about today to hear a little bit about what we're hearing, at least on the national level, when it comes to things on campus. Really quickly, I did want to just follow up on the introduction to let you know a little bit more about what I do at AAUW. I've gotten to know some of you mainly by phone and email too. When I started at AAUW, I was the person you called if you needed public policy program brochures or you needed something mailed to you from the Public Policy Department. And I've been there for 7 years working with our branches and our states and traveling to get to meet AAUW members, working with the National Convention that was in DC a few years ago. And so it's really great to again be out and talking to members here in New York. I am the Government Relations Manager, which means I am a lobbyist for the organization. A lobbyist with a scarlet red L on my chest. But you know, I'm a lobbyist for good. And lobbyist is sort of a term that just means that I'm your voice in DC, working on these public policy issues, on federal legislation that's a priority for AAUW, and trying to understand sort of how we can be a part of the conversation around some really important things that are going on. The public policy program, I brought copies if anyone needs any. There's some brochures over there and some other assorted goodies from the Public Policy Department that you all should feel free to take. But the public policy program, I hope all of you are familiar with it, is the program, the principles that guide the work that we do when it comes to public policy. It's updated every 2 years by AAUW members. And shameless plug, it's time to update the public policy program again. So make sure you take a brochure and think about all the things that are in there that we work on, that interest you, the things you want to change, the things you want us to do more on, because it's time to do that again. That public policy program is broad, and so while I'm here today to talk about higher education and to talk about Title IX and campus sexual violence and to talk about community colleges and access to higher education, I also handle AAUW's work on work-life policies like paid sick days, paid leave, FMLA, the work that we do on the Workforce Investment Act and career and technical education, so some of that job skill training that goes on, the work that AAUW does on the Violence Against Women Act and on welfare. And so those programs are all the things that I focus on in the DC office, and my wonderful colleagues help monitor and provide some activity around things like paid sick days and retirement security. You may know Lisa Matz, our Vice President for Government Relations, is really the go-to expert across the country and in DC on some of those policies, the pay equity issues that we know we're having to fight across the country. New York's a great leader on this. There's a women's economic agenda, equality agenda, excuse me. There's a lot going on, and AAUW is really on the forefront of that work in DC as well. My colleague Erin Prangley, who many of you may know, who really champions our work on K-12 education, on equity and STEM, on Title IX, on immigration, on the long list of things that we work on. So I just wanted to give you the quick spiel about how many different things we work on, how many different things AAUW members across the country work on. And while I'm going to talk about higher education today, I hope that you'll think of me as a resource throughout the weekend to talk about any of those policies, because those are really important, I know, to you here in New York, and they're really important to us in DC. So, I can probably skip the next slide, or I'll leave it up for a second. My contact information. I've been asked by several people for my email address and all those sort of things. So I wanted to make sure that you had the information so that you know how to get a hold of us if you need it. So this is who I am. There I am in my lovely picture there. And so feel free to reach out to us. I was just having a conversation at breakfast about requesting materials, and so I also want to encourage you all to use that phone number there if you're ever holding an event and you think some public policy materials would be helpful. So, moving